That's the opening from Bach's Sinfonia della Cantata number 29 in C major. It's been a long time since I've done one of these videos where I tie Baroque music to writing, and part of the reason for that is because I used to do an awful lot of takes on them. I figured that I had to get the music perfect, I figured that I had to get the speech exactly right. Since then, I have watched a lot of Substack videos, and I have seen Nobel laureates pick up their computers and change rooms because there was too much background noise. I've seen professional historians have to stop talking because their pet parrot was making too much noise in the background. I've seen professional journalists have to pause because his pet dog was making too much noise in the background. So I would like to thank the Substack community for lowering the standards. Please bear that in mind as you watch this video. So this morning I would like to talk about pace. And I would like to connect Bach's Sinfonia to Dan Brown's The Da Vinci Code. And the reason for the connection is that both of them are very fast-paced, and yet neither of them drags, neither of them gets repetitive, neither of them wears down readers over time, despite the constant motion that's going on. And I think there are parallels in how the two of them do it. Oh, incidentally, those of you who read me a lot are probably aware that I tend to use the same books over and over again as examples. I think this is the third time I've used Dan Brown's Da Vinci Code for something. I use a lot of Rex Stout. The reason for this is I've read these books over and over again. I have just rejoiced in the way that the authors manage to do what they do. And I think this is not a bad way to learn writing. If you read the same book over and over again, the first time through you can get lost in it and just enjoy yourself. The second time through, you know where it's going, and you can start to appreciate how the author gets you there, how the plot twists work, how clues are laid in, how surprises are set up. You get to learn the beauty of the structure of stories from reading something over and over again, and that's not a bad way to learn. Anyway, this is a very fast tempo piece. And again, I'm going to talk a lot about music, but you don't have to know anything about music, I hope, to be able to understand this. I think my examples will be clear. Tempo is just how fast the notes are played. And except for a little bit at the beginning, a little bit at the end, the Sinfonia is just one long 16th note run. And yet, it doesn't wear you out, it doesn't get boring, it doesn't get repetitive. How does Bach do it? For one thing, there is a musical concept called harmonic tempo, which is basically how often the piece changes key. Again, you don't have to know anything about music, just listen. The key of C, in which this piece starts out, is generally defined by 3 notes. And now, I'll play the opening again as best I can with one hand, holding that chord so you can hear when it changes key. That's it. More than a page in a single key. And throughout the piece, the harmonic tempo, how fast the piece changes keys, changes and builds. Eventually it starts changing key more often and more quickly toward the end to build up tension, but the harmonic tempo is this completely different arc underneath the musical tempo, the speed at which the notes are played. In Dan Brown, you have a constant sense of danger. Somebody is always after Robert and Sophie. Whether it's the French police or the international police or the mad albino monk. And by the way, I take a real delight in being able to say the phrase mad albino monk, because how often do you get to do that? But anyway, someone's always after them. Constantly, continuously, and if you're not seeing them escape and find clever ways to escape, you're seeing how the people who are after them are setting up new traps or discovering new ways to get at them. It's continuous. But underneath that source of tension, there's also the tension of what exactly is it all about? What is the priority of Sion up to? What is the mad monk trying to find? What are all the people who are after him trying to uncover? What's the secret that Sophie's family has been keeping from her all her life? And that source of tension is separate from the tension of how are they going to escape now. And it also builds over the course of the story to give the story an overall arc that's separate from the adventure. The other thing that Bach does is he brings back the same phrases or similar phrases, but in a different key. So for instance, near the beginning you have and then a little bit later, like 3 pages later, it comes back in, but in a different key, the key of F. Incidentally, this piece is kind of on the edge of my ability, and I've been practicing it quite a bit, but apparently not quite enough, so again, lower standards. In the same way, Robert Langton introduces elements into the story at one point, and then changes their meaning later on. Right near the beginning, you have Robert Langton pointing out that if Sophie's grandfather had wanted to contact him, he would have written his name in the invisible ink in the Louvre. You eventually find out that he did, and this is why the police suspect him. And even further on, we meet Leigh Sebring, who is introduced as a colleague of Robert Langton's, someone he trusts, someone he goes to for help, someone who he expects to help him. And that sense that Sebring is one of the good guys is reinforced when Sebring's servant pulls a gun on him. And it's revealed that the servant is working for the mysterious teacher, who is one of the bad guys in the background. And it's only later that we find out that that business with the gun was staged. Leigh Sebring is the teacher. He's still part of the story. His character has been introduced, he's been woven into the story, but all of a sudden his meaning for the story changes. In the same way, Bach uses the same phrase, it ties different parts of the music together, but he changes the meaning of it by bringing it in a different key, sometimes in a minor key, which is darker and more dangerous, like Sebring. And the final lesson is probably the most important lesson you can learn from Baroque music, and I don't know if you knew there were lessons you could learn from Baroque music. Baroque music is polyphonic. Most of the music you hear has a melody, and then it has a harmony that kind of supports the melody. And if you play the harmony alone, you probably won't recognize the piece, because everything that makes a piece of music what it is tied up in the melody. In Baroque music, you don't have a melody and a harmony, at least not usually. What you have are separate melodies. So for instance, you might have, keep this to stay open. New book, I haven't really broken it down yet. You'll have and then you'll have as you can hear, each one of those is its own thing. It's a melody. But this is what it sounds like when you put them together. Incidentally, that piece is an old German chorale, dates back to the time of Luther, called Herzlich tut mich verlangen, which is usually translated, O Sacred Head Now Wounded. But if it sounds familiar, it's because Paul Simon borrowed it for American Tune. I have been mistaken and certainly confused. Recycling. Anyway, one of the ways that Bach keeps things interesting is that 16th note run gets passed from voice to voice. And other voices, and sometimes the voice that's doing the 16th note, yada da da yada da da yada da da, is accompanied by other voices that are doing things that are much more quiet, much calmer. So for instance, incidentally, a lot of modern organists have a tablet that sits on the keyboard, and they have a little thing on their glasses, and if they nod their head, the tablet automatically advances to a new page. I have photocopied pages, so bear that in mind. So for instance, where is that large pedal point? There it is. There's a point later on in the piece where the one voice just stops. Because the two different voices are doing two different things, you get a sense that the piece is not relentless. You have these other voices anchoring things that are going on. And in the same way, the different characters, the two main characters actually in the Da Vinci Code, Sophie and Robert Langton, have two different desires, two different things that are driving them. Robert Langton's just trying to find out the answers to the puzzle. He's trying to find out what all these strange symbols that he's been discovering that have been thrust upon him actually mean. And Sophie is trying to discover what the secret is that her family has been keeping all of her life. She's had the sense that there's been a secret there, and it's always bothered her. It's always been like a lump in her relationship with her grandfather, and she's looking to finally resolve it. These are two different sources of tension. These are two different voices doing two different things, and yet they blend together. Because when they finally discover the reality, spoilers, when they finally discover the truth of Sophie's heritage, that she is in fact a descendant of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, it resolves Robert's problem, it resolves Sophie's problem, and also throughout the story they are slowly learning to appreciate each other. They're slowly coming to be interested in each other romantically. It brings them together at the end. It resolves Sophie's relationship with her grandfather. The one final act ties together all of these different threads into a single story. And it's sometimes easy to forget that your story is made up of different characters with different desires and different needs and different wants, and yet they all have to tie together. And one of the ways to give your story a sense that readers are reading real life, because this is how real life works, is to keep your characters separate, to keep them all in mind, to keep all the different character balls in the air until they come together at the end. So, I'm going to try playing the piece from beginning to end. As I say, it is on the edge of my abilities. I do have to kind of throw pages down as I go. Again, lower standards. Before I do, by the way, I would like to thank St. John's Episcopal Church of Asheville, Massachusetts, for letting me use their instrument. It is an 1860. Let me show you. It is an 1860 William Johnson in essentially original condition. It's got new leather on the bellows, and it's got the pipes have been refurbished and various things, but it's essentially